On January 5th, 2024, Nikkei.com, a self-proclaimed provider of award-winning quality journalism, published an interview with the executive producer of the Dragon Ball franchise, Akio Iyoku. Now, if you are in any way up to speed with recent happenings regarding the Dragon Ball franchise, you can recall the whole pot stirring featured the likes of Iyoku-san and him creating a brand new company called Capsule Corporation Tokyo. Yeah, okay, I see where we're going. We talked about this briefly in one of our previous videos, and thanks to the translations from the likes of Super Chronicles over on Twitter, we can look through the most interesting tidbits and see how things have developed, as well as how many of the rumors that arose during that period were proven to actually be real. To quickly sum it all up for you right now, around about September 2023, we got struck down by reports coming from Bunshun Online, one of the more influential Japanese weekly periodicals known for its investigative journalism, that Mr. Iyoku had parted ways with Shueisha and wanted to form his new company, Capsule Corporation Tokyo, to try and deal with the distribution of all non-manga stuff related to Dragon Ball. In his opening statement from January 5th, Iyoku states, "Dragon Ball will celebrate its 40th anniversary in 2024. Dragon Ball is a unique and amazing work. Rather than thinking of the work in relative or uniform terms, the keynote is to think about how it should be done as a work of art. As the executive producer of a work with unprecedented longevity, my mission is to expand and convey what the original creator Akira Toriyama had created. I will continue to produce works such as anime series, movies, and games over the next 10 years. Adopting what is popular at the moment does not increase the popularity and probability of success. I will not be swayed by the current trends, but will create works that I feel will be good enough." Now, 10 years, that sounds like a lot, and also not a lot if you think about it. In July 2025, the premiere episodes of Dragon Ball Super will be, you guessed it, 10 years old. Granted, a lot of the last decade was spent with quite a considerable amount of downtime in terms of animated content, with 2 movies breaking the mold after the series concluded in 2018. But other than that, in terms of animated publications, aside from Super Dragon Ball Heroes, not much to report. But it remains to be seen how many projects Iyoku is willing to oversee. For now, of course, we know about next year's, or technically this year's actually, Dragon Ball Daima, which seems to have been cooking for some unspecified but substantial amount of time, the complete opposite of what Super had. And we're almost certainly getting our next movie sometime soon after that. We won't be going through the entire thing here, but there are some interesting statements I wish to share with you. Concerning when the craze had died down. There was a time when the Dragon Ball craze, which had spread around the world over the past 40 years, had died down. When I became the head of Shueisha's Dragon Room in 2016, I could not visualize what was really happening. 7 to 8 years ago, I went to a huge event in Brazil called CCXP. I was told that Japanese anime was popular in South America, but there was a discrepancy from what I was told. The feedback from fans was weak. It may have been at the peak of its popularity when it was on air in South America. I also thought it was the result of relying on the old-fashioned zeal. Therefore, starting with the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie in 2018, we took steps such as actively participating in events. Okay, let's just stop here for a while. CCXP, or simply Comic Con Experience, was hosted between December the 1st and the 4th of 2016. The Goku Black arc had just concluded in Japan, with the episode that was about to air being episode 69, nice, featuring Arale, the ultimate Dragon Ball litmus test. So I don't believe it was that year he was talking about. Surely the Goku Black arc had left some kind of mark, although the ending might have been a little bit disappointing and would have been raw to everybody at the time, let's just say that mildly. And to be fair though, Iyoku doesn't specify the year, but seeing how hyped people were about Goku vs Jiren in 2017 and 18 in Mexico, I just don't see the appeal of Dragon Ball being weak. Really. Central and Southern America have always loved Dragon Ball. It's never died down. I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. Iyoku, but from our interactions with our Southern American friends and some of the viewers that watched his channel, it seems that the period he mentions might have been one of the most hyped periods in the history of Super, maybe even Dragon Ball. Because remember that time when Mexico and Toei had a diplomatic incident? But then again, it's hard to confirm it without knowing which CCXP he attended, as he doesn't appear on the guest list, so he might have been there on some kind of semi-private capacity, not really a guest, but maybe a representative in the background. Also, if we mean 2015 or 2014, then, well, either Super wasn't a thing, or, maybe the rushed schedule was to blame. I'm just saying, not implying that Mr. Iyoku is lying purposefully, I think we collectively, as a multinational fandom, have vastly different memories of that period in time than he does. Anyway, in later parts of the interview, though it feels more like a report of Iyoku himself, he touches upon his ambition of making Dragon Ball more of an international medium and the decision to announce Daima at Comic-Con. Daima was announced at New York Comic-Con. The Dragon Ball series is recognized around the world. It makes no sense to announce it somewhere domestic. Comic-Con is a great place to announce your work. People who understand the value of the culture are gathered there to begin with, and we chose Comic-Con because of its ability to spread our work throughout the world. Overseas expansion is currently being considered as a necessary means of spreading the word about our work. If we compare the flow of manga titles selling in book format and then finally becoming anime to a river, the overseas developments were the ones that followed the river, meaning that in the past it was a fan in the sense that the overseas expansion followed later. I am convinced that Dragon Ball has pioneered many things as a Japanese anime. I have a sense of mission that if there is something that no one else has done, I must continue to challenge it. Honestly, I don't really know what he means by that, other than that he might be trying to divorce various media from the franchise, or okay, maybe not divorce per se, but give them their own identities, like they're small little parts of a glorious whole. How much of this is connected to his apparent conflict with Shueisha? It's debatable, but it's hard not to think about when reading this paragraph. It is hard to say if he is genuinely wanting to take the series in brand new directions which are novel and dynamic and refresh the entire widget, or if he's just tired of waiting for the other departments at the company to make any meaningful decisions, that he's tired of dawdling, and we can relate to that. The intentions of Iyoku in that sense are noble, but still, it's something that could be seen in between the lines but is merely implied, not confirmed. And then these comments are about the industry being overcompetitive. It's tough to see the competition among anime due to the emergence of streaming sites, etc. Competition has become excessive. We must not create a situation where a manga becomes an anime and when the anime is over, the content ends as is. The ideal situation is to create a situation where the average viewer sees the content. We are in a cycle of consumption, and in some aspects the cycle is becoming short-lived. I don't think it's good at all to have a boom that builds up and then burns down, which can be a factor in the content not lasting long. That's another odd statement from the point of view of a fan, but I do agree that anime is more likely to reach the average viewer than manga, especially these days, and that, in the case of Dragon Ball, the end of the anime meant the end of Super for many people. They just quit and left and forgot all about Dragon Ball back in 2018. But I fail to see what it has to do with over-competitiveness, which seems to be connected to famously bad labor conditions for most animators and people connected with the entire creation of that said media, rather than whatever Mr. Iyoku is talking about. What's stopping them from adapting the existing Moro and Granola sagas already, other than internal bickering and not being sure about where to go from here? Well, he talks about it a little bit more in this particular paragraph. It'll be tough if we do not create a place to compete differently from anime as content. It is advisable for works that are popular now to be distributed simultaneously, around the world, to repeat generations and reach the next stage of popularity. In order to bring in overseas strength, a leading role is needed. In order for a producer to take on this role, they must transcend the boundaries of the corporate organization. There must be someone who has a bird's eye view of the work and is in a position to say to each company, I think you should do this. I push myself to be a catalyst for this through various discussions. For Japanese content to continue, it is necessary to have someone who can say, the status quo is not good enough. Here we see the same sentiment of anime and manga becoming more independent from one another, shining through a little bit more. Also, I am sorry if this sounds overly sarcastic to you, but hear us out. This feels to me like more of a power play more than anything else. Sure, This might be connected to the way of thinking, if no one is doing anything with Dragon Ball, I will, but it certainly does make you think. The biggest thing that we can take from all of this is that the overseas expansion of the franchise is no longer a secondary deal. It's not an afterthought for Japan, something that we could see with Superhero in great detail. They were thinking international market. And Nikkei.com's own analysis of the interview states that, in the past, overseas expansion of anime was treated as an extra. The original manga was published in book format, became a hit, and was then made into an animated series in Japan. According to Mr. Iyoku, overseas expansion was something that would always come later. There was a time when the Dragon Ball anime was sold overseas for about $1,000 per episode. Currently, the idea is to expand the production to the rest of the world without separating domestic and overseas markets. It was only because of the huge domestic market that overseas expansion was not seen as a viable option. After reaching a record high of 6.53 million copies of Weekly Shonen Jump at the end of 1994, thanks to the exploding popularity of Dragon Ball, the circulation of this magazine fell to about 1.2 million by 2023. The challenge is to make the leap to the next generation's industry. Many of the Japanese people grew up watching Son Goku, who became stronger and stronger by breaking through his limits every time he met a powerful enemy. When faced with a different situation, Son Goku would say, "I'm getting pumped up. Let's enjoy facing new challenges and take on the world without fear of failure." So what do we make out of this whole ordeal? Well, it's easy to think that we wanted to roast Mr. Iyoku's hopes and dreams with this discussion, but it couldn't be further from the truth. He is a controversial character within the fandom, as many decisions that seem to be halting the franchise are often tracked back to him being the root cause of it, with the most often cited reasons being the lack of novelty and reverting to nostalgia for a cheap, quick buck. On the other hand, a lot of that nostalgia-filled work turns out to be good, with the two recent movies being a very good and neat and apt example of that. Also, unlike a lot of the higher-ups at Shueisha, he generally seems to want to do stuff with the franchise for better or worse. Sure, it may not be received the best, but at least it's something. And most importantly, he does have Toriyama's ear, and has served as a liaison between him and other creative parts responsible for creating Dragon Ball. A lot of things go through him, and Toriyama, without Iyoku there, wouldn't communicate to anyone. He certainly shaped a lot of stuff regarding the franchise, both good and bad, but at least it's something that we can talk about. And while we do commend him for wanting to push the franchise further forward, some of his wording does seem a little bit brash, let's just put it mildly. What does it mean for the manga though? Are Moro, Granola, and whoever comes next forever doomed to be in that weird state of limbo where they'll just be on bits of paper? It's hard to say, as Iyoku said that while the anime doesn't have to follow the manga, he never said that it never will. And honestly, we would like to see the animated version of those two arcs, if anything, to see if some improvements in the animated form could make these stories even better. As of today, when we're recording this video, it has been confirmed that the manga is going to return for chapter 101. It's just hard not to notice how little buzz is being made surrounding this, especially after the lackluster chapter 100, where everybody thought we were going to get a brand new arc beginning, but we just got a little bit of a recap and no other elaborations about where Black Frieza is. Is it a bad sign for the medium? Or are they preparing a sleeper hit for later in the month? It's hard to say, but honestly, it does seem that 2024 is going to be a better and more interesting year for Dragon Ball than the previous one. Hopefully, it'll be good for the manga as well. But what do you folks think? What are your hopes for next year? Make sure to let us know in the comments, and I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!